With the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, I think it's fair to say that we live in a sort of golden age of portable handheld video game consoles. From the Switch to the Steam Deck to the new ROG Xbox Ally X, it's really only PlayStation that's missing a truly dedicated handheld option, unless of course you count the PlayStation Portal, though at its core it is kind of just a streaming tablet with two halves of a DualSense controller slapped on the sides. But there's a big issue I've been noticing more and more with each passing year as these handhelds continue to release and improve, one that never used to be a problem due to both necessity as well as inherent limitations. The problem I have with the Switch 2 is quite possibly for many of us not a problem at all, but for some it may leave you longing for a time long gone. A time when portable handheld consoles used to actually be truly portable. Hey, how's it going? I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and for nearly a decade now, handheld consoles have progressively been getting larger and more cumbersome, and there's a lot of reasons for this. The desire for a larger display, more powerful hardware, and immersive gameplay. It all comes at the cost of having a convenient, compact form factor. But this never used to be the case. Once upon a time, any handheld you owned would easily fit in your pocket, and was truly easy to bring anywhere at any time. But since consoles like the PS Vita and Nintendo 3DS, the selection for this type of device has really dried up, which makes sense given the rise of smartphones, but I still can't help but feel like there's a huge hole in the market where those smaller consoles used to be. The Switch 2, just like all of these other handhelds out there right now, is absolutely portable. It runs off a battery and can be played disconnected from any cables or TV. It is fully portable, but it's not always practical. It's very large with a 7.9-inch display, along with Joy-Cons on the sides, making it impossible to stuff this thing in your pockets. If you want to bring your Switch 2 along with you somewhere, you're going to need a carrying case, or put it in a backpack or a purse or something to that extent, whereas with my old PS Vita, I could just shove it in my pocket and bam, I was good to go. Because of this limitation, I don't really bring the Switch 2 to very many places, even if I technically could. And even when I do bring my Switch 2 with me, wherever I'm going, I often find myself hesitating to actually play it if I won't have an opportunity to plug it in at some point, given the extremely lackluster battery life that won't get much more than a couple hours playing something like Cyberpunk 2077 on the go. These are issues I never had with my PS Vita or my DSi XL. These are issues that plague the current generation of handhelds. So today, let's go ahead and delve into the issue with the Switch 2, as well as basically every other modern handheld console. Today, we're discussing the portability problem. Realistically, there's a lot of issues with Nintendo's second generation Switch. Horrible DRM, high pricing, not a lot of games yet, so this console feeling more like a Switch Pro rather than a full, truly new generation, you name it. But there's also a lot of good too, and this isn't a video of me trying to bash the Switch 2. I'll save the majority of my complaints as well as plenty of praise for my eventual full review on the console. Side note, yes, all of this absolutely is the definition of a first world problem, but hey, I love complaining, and this is a tech channel, it's what I do. The portability problem is the subject of today's video because I think it's sort of an interesting topic to discuss and shows how dramatically the technological landscape has shifted, how this need for smaller, more compact devices has faded in the light of everyone now having a smartphone in their pockets at all times. A big reason that these consoles have gotten so big is no doubt mainly because our phones have reduced the need for a pocket-sized gaming device. A smartphone can now serve that same purpose. Handheld consoles now serve as a higher-end niche, and that completely makes sense, but I can't help but feel we've lost something along the way that perhaps we used to take for granted, and it all comes back to true portability. While, as I said, we do live in a golden age of portable handhelds, there's a big catch. These systems just aren't that portable anymore and haven't been for a while. Now don't get me wrong, they are by definition portable, but they're not always practical because they're so large. Too large to fit in your pocket, and if you're always having to carry around a case or having your Switch 2 in your backpack, it does limit just how portable this system truly can be. Portable handhelds used to be far more compact and had a greater emphasis on bringing these devices anywhere because that's what they were. They had to be easy to bring anywhere on the go. Shove your DS, your PSP, your Vita, your 3DS, or whatever else in your pocket, and that's it. You don't need to bring a case or your backpack with you, just the console. From the onset of portable handhelds, this really has always been the emphasis. Look at the first Game Boy from 1989. It's chunky, obviously, and the display is small and monochrome, but the console is designed to be easily held and played in your hands, and it fits in your pocket. It even takes AA batteries along with small, easy to bring around cartridges. The most successful Game Boy games weren't typically ones that pushed the 8-bit graphics on the system to their limits, but rather ones with simplistic styles that were easy to see, understand, and most importantly, were super fun on the go. Games like Pokemon and Tetris. When you look at a competing console like the Sega Game Gear, which had a far more impressive full-color display and was certainly superior when it came to the hardware, you might think it would be a huge hit, but it really wasn't, at least relative to the Game Boy. It sold over 10 million units, which is still quite respectable, but the Game Boy sold almost 120 million, if you include the newer variants of the system, like the Game Boy Color. The 1998 Game Boy Color, while it did bring a color display and slimmer design, still played the same games as the original Game Boy, and wasn't particularly impressive hardware even compared to the 1990 Game Gear. But it played those same brilliant Nintendo games that were so ideal on the go, and perhaps almost just as importantly, Game Boy was far better when it came to the actual portability side of things. Battery life on the Game Gear was atrocious and would eat through 6 AA batteries in only a few hours. Ultimately, the market had decided that even with its monochrome display without a backlight, at least in most variants, the Game Boy was the far better buy to Sega's own console. Power wasn't an undesired commodity. The Game Gear was able to play Master System games, it was impressive, but the compromise required to bring it was just far too great at the time. Historically speaking, the most successful portable consoles tended to really nail the on-the-go experience. And while these portable systems were always limited in hardware potential compared to home consoles, that didn't hinder them from hosting some of the best video games ever created. Limitations often breed creativity, and something like the Pokemon series is a fantastic example of that. I played so many hours of Soul Silver on my DS back in the day, and the fact that there was tons of text, no voice acting, it was all 2D, none of this reduced my enjoyment of the title. Sometimes the expectation of utilizing greater hardware can even bring a worse overall game. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet were technical disasters, and even if they brought more impressive gameplay on paper compared to the older games, they aren't regarded nearly as highly due to those issues. With limitations can also come creative solutions that you wouldn't see otherwise, and in the earlier days of handheld consoles, there always were these innate limitations. The hardware could only be so powerful as the portability was put at the forefront. The Nintendo DS folding closed and having dual screens was a great example of creativity within the industry that we probably would have never seen had Nintendo been capable of producing home console level hardware on a portable device. Or how about the DS's touchscreen and stylus? They were such a unique and core part of that console's identity, and yet they likely never would have needed to happen had Nintendo been capable of putting the hardware of, say, a GameCube into the portable system. Because of course, then you would want to play GameCube games on there, and they required a more standard control scheme. Because the DS was its own thing, Nintendo was able to add this whole gimmick, this whole new way to play, that resulted in so many new, unique games with so many different ways to play them. You wouldn't see a game like Brain Age anymore because, well, I mean, modern consoles don't have styluses, but beyond just that, why would you play Brain Age when you could play Breath of the Wild instead, right? Having a DS also made you a part of a community. You could play Mario Kart with your friends without even owning Mario Kart. This is something the Switch 2 is sort of imitating, but it's not doing it as well. It's not as seamless, and Mario Kart World, of all games, isn't even supported with GameShare. That is insane. And I don't know, there's just something so special about that Nintendo DS that I just don't think can be replicated on modern systems. Now, obviously a lot has changed since the 1990s and the 2000s, and by the time the first Nintendo Switch rolled around in 2017, the world looked very different. The need for portable handhelds had been reduced dramatically thanks to the advent of smartphones, which like portable consoles of old fit in our pockets and can be brought practically anywhere. The niche that used to be filled by the PSP or Nintendo DS was disappearing quickly. Even come 2012 with the PS Vita, and smartphones were very popular and capable of playing more games on the go from the Play Store or App Store than we could have ever dreamed of beforehand. While there still was a demand for dedicated portable handhelds, it was drying up quickly, and I think it's fair to say that much of the market that remained were often made up of kids who didn't own smartphones yet. Thus, consoles like the 3DS and 2DS continued to thrive, even with the rapidly changing times. It was also helped by having those legendary Nintendo titles that would invariably keep the company relevant, so no matter how badly the Wii U was failing, Nintendo was still going strong. Perhaps then it only makes sense that Nintendo would merge their two core console lines into into one with the Switch, a system that could play both portably and at home on the TV, with genuinely full home console level titles. It's something that the PS Vita had sort of tried to do, but far less successfully. It was limited by the mobile hardware at the time and was never going to play most of the games that were on PS3 or PS4, but still, even having approximately the power of a PS2 in your hands was far beyond anything we'd really seen from a handheld, and the 3DS didn't match that potential. And now of course we have the Switch 2, alongside a plethora of competitors, with especially the Steam Deck really standing out. I think having a portable PC handheld like this is amazing, though it's not going to be as simple or convenient as a Nintendo product. With the Steam Deck, you have so much control over the graphical settings, which is both a blessing and a curse. With the Switch 2, you might see better optimization in games and an easier overall experience, but it's going to depend on how much work the developer puts into it. There definitely can be a problem with the games on these portable systems sometimes being heavily downgraded in order to work on the system to begin with. In fairness, this isn't an issue exclusive to recent generations of gaming. As much as it hurts to see Doom running on the first Switch at such a low resolution, it's still at least the full game, not a completely different title under the same name like we would often see in the Nintendo DS days. I remember feeling very jilted when my new copy of LEGO Marvel Superheroes on my Vita wasn't actually the same game as on PS4 with the open world, which is kind of why I wanted it in the first place. The Switch 1 sat in this weird spot where you didn't need to have two versions of the same game, but it wasn't really powerful enough to play the newest games releasing, at least very well. However, it still was powerful enough to play that game at a heavily reduced graphical fidelity and potentially awful frame rate. Thankfully, the Switch 2 has essentially fixed this by just dramatically increasing the horsepower to the point that it can play games like Cyberpunk 2077, which is really cool to see, but in a few years, we're going to see the same problems arise again. Don't forget, Cyberpunk itself is already almost 5 years old, even if it's changed a ton since release. The Switch 2 is powerful enough for the moment, but as games continue to push its limits, we may end up in the same situation as the Switch 1 down the road. But I digress. I think having some games performing poorly is probably still a worthwhile trade-off to get the scope and scale of titles like Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom available on a handheld. To play these games portably wherever you want, that's amazing, and it's going to be many times worth the potential inconvenience of having to bring around a carrying case or a backpack. Plus, you might have a backpack or a purse or whatever anyways. Except, if you are playing these large-scale games, that battery life really begins to rear its ugly head. The Switch 2 lasts only 2 to 6.5 hours depending on what you're playing, which is about the same as the original Switch from 2017. Worse than that updated model, the Switch Lite, the Switch OLED. Coming off the Switch OLED, this does feel like a significant downgrade. And again, this really brings up the question of whether or not you can truly consider this a portable system if you're only getting a couple hours of battery life out of it before needing to plug in. It's fine if you're near a power source, but what if you're not? I'm gonna be traveling soon, and I've got about a 6-hour plane ride coming up, and if I want to play Cyberpunk or Zelda, I'm looking at only 2 to maybe 3 hours of battery life, depending on how much I turn down the brightness. The USB ports on a plane won't be enough to power my Switch 2, so my only real option, if I want to play for longer, is to bring a battery bank, and that's fine. I'm totally happy to do that, but again, we're starting to get to this gray area of how portable these consoles truly are. Poor battery life isn't unique to the Switch 2, and even the best batteries on these large modern handhelds probably aren't going to get you as much life as a lot of the older, much smaller consoles. Now, that being said, I'm also able to play games that are so much more impressive on the Switch 2 than I ever could have on something like my DSi XL. So is it worth it? Probably, for most people, but if you don't think so, you're really not left with a lot of options. The final handheld of this previous generation would be the 2DS XL, which was discontinued in 2020. The Switch Lite is probably the closest thing to that we've had since, which can be fit at least in a large pocket, but I think it does suck that there's just not a lot of options for those who might want a compact system. It's the reason the PS Vita still thrives with a dedicated community, and it, along with the 3DS and 2DS, can still be quite valuable on the used market. It's a niche that's gone unfilled outside of these older systems. That's not a bad thing per se though, and picking up maybe like a 2DS XL opens you up to a crazy huge game library, as well as tons of potential for homebrewing and emulation. Same with the PS Vita when you take into account PSP games especially, which can be easily played through homebrewing. Plus, these consoles use physical media, games that are actually on their cartridges. If you buy, say, Hogwarts Legacy for Switch 2 and excitedly put it in your console but don't have an internet connection, sorry, this isn't actually the game but a key to play the game, and you need Wi-Fi to download it before you can actually play it. I think it's just interesting that there's a whole hole in the market right now for truly portable, small handheld consoles, and the reason for it really all boils down to the existence of smartphones. And with emulators on the App Store now, whether you're on iPhone or Android, you've got plenty of options for gaming on the go. Problem is, I hate touch controls, and while you can get accessories or use a wireless controller, it's just not the same experience as an all-in-one system like the PS Vita. But because of phones, the market evolved to fill a newer, more pressing niche: bigger, more immersive gaming experiences on the go, and hence the current generation of modern handhelds. We've gained a lot in hardware, leading to a far greater scope and scale of games, but we've also lost something too, in that previous compact, portable first form factor. And that right there is the portability problem. Perhaps not much of a problem at all for most people, but I do still miss the ease of throwing my Vita in my pocket and bringing it along with me almost anywhere. Same with my old DSi XL. It was so easy, so convenient, so fun, and maybe that's another thing that really bothers me: the lack of variety and creativity in the market today. Switch 2, Steam Deck, ROG Ally, PlayStation Portal, they all kind of look the same. DS and PSP, they couldn't look more different, and it added something so special to these dedicated gaming handhelds that brought so much entertainment and joy to our lives growing up. In any case, I think I'm right about done here. Honestly, I think I can live with the size of the Switch 2, and if I had to choose, I would take it being large, because I do in fact have my smartphone. But the battery life, I feel, is fairly unacceptable for a portable console, and I wish Nintendo had done more to try to improve things there. But that's the portability problem, so make sure you leave a comment down below with your thoughts. Do you miss the days of the DS and PSP? Do you think we have it better now with these larger modern handhelds? I think objectively speaking we absolutely do, but I still miss those pocket-sized consoles. What can I say? I'm a nostalgic. Bit of a different video today, but it's something that crossed my mind and I thought it'd be interesting to talk about. If you found the video interesting, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more tech content. Huge shout out to the channel members, thank you guys so much for your support, and thank you all for watching. I'm Josh from 91 Tech, and I will see you all next time.